While rotation has not happened in the Pokemon TCG outside of Japan, it just happened within Japan. And because of that, we have an opportunity to look at how the game is forming over there so that we can prepare our decks for post-rotation play. And I'm going to be doing a series of videos covering all of the major deck archetypes, and today we're going to start with Charizard EX. I know there's a lot of people that have been anxiously awaiting for this one. Charizard's a very popular deck archetype, and there's a number of people who bought the Charizard League Battle deck that have been wondering how they're going to update it for post-rotation play. So today, I hope to shed a light on what Charizard looks like in the post-rotation future. I'm Jeff from inthirdperson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's take a look at post-rotation Charizard EX decks. Before we get into the list, just a couple of quick notes. This is a very new meta right now, so we've only got 2 days of data to work with here. Charizard decks are going to continually evolve and be optimized. I wouldn't necessarily watch this video with the intent of these are the exact 60 cards, but just as an idea to see where these lists are going to give you an opportunity to prepare. I will do a roundup of all of the meta lists just before rotation happens on our side, so you can see if there's been any updates to Charizard since this video. And if you want to see all of the lists from Japan yourself, hit the link at the bottom bullet point here. In the grand scheme of things, Charizard doesn't lose that much. Yes, it does lose some really awesome pieces like Rotom V for drawing cards at the beginning of the game, Lumineon for grabbing a supporter card of our choice, and both of these are amazing Forest Seal Stone targets, helping us grab a card from our deck. And in tandem with Arven, really awesome combo for getting set up, and then Radiant Charizard as that sort of end game attacker that's a single prizer, can skew the prize race. All of these are notable losses. And then we have a couple of other pieces that we're losing as well: Thornton, Duskull, Manaphy, and to a certain extent Bibarel as well. And that being said, I don't think Charizard is too badly hit by rotation, because at its core, the Charizard deck is Charizard with that awesome attack, and it can accelerate energy to itself, and then Pidgeot, where you can just grab a card of your choice from the deck. And even a number of these lists that we're going to look at actually don't even have Pidgeot in it as well. Charizard in and of itself is just such an insane card that it can find ways to survive and even thrive in a post-rotation format. Here's a tier list from Pokébook, compiling all of the decks that have gotten top 16 at the different City League tournaments for the past couple of days. There's some clear frontrunners here, including Dragapult and Raging Bolt, but Charizard is the next one down, and yes, there's a big gap between Raging Bolt and Charizard, but Charizard's still one of the stronger decks in the game, and I don't foresee that changing anytime soon. One cool thing that Pokébook also does is they make a full power edition tier list where they only count decks that make top 4 in these tournaments, and Charizard's still pretty much holding strong. If anything, its meta share among the top 4 decks goes up a little bit. Yes, the gap between it and Raging Bolt and Dragapult is still pretty big, but Charizard very much standing strong as one of the stronger decks in the game. We're going to start things off with the Charizard Pidgeot shell. Now, based on the results from Japan, this particular way of building Charizard that we have become very familiar with doesn't seem like it's going to be the popular way to play Charizard going forward. There are only a handful of lists that were still playing this style of Charizard list, but I do want to start with this one because I feel like a lot of players have a shell like this, and making your current Charizard list into something that looks like this, or the one we're going to look at right after, is going to be fairly straightforward. So we're going to start here as a place to upgrade our Charizard decks. This one came in 3rd place, and we've got our core of Charizard and Pidgeot here as well. We've got the Duskmar line, and then we have a couple of support pieces that have been adjusted here to compensate for the lack of your Rotom and your Lumineon in particular. One of those pieces is Cleffa. Now, Cleffa is a card that has been in and out of Charizard lists here and there, but this is a really awesome card that helps you draw up to 7 cards as its attack, Grasping Draw for 0 energy. And yes, it has very low HP, but for the most part, not a lot of decks can take advantage of that other than just taking a single KO, which isn't that big of a deal. So Cleffa helping you draw up to 7 cards gives you more opportunities to grab the pieces you need to set up your Charizard and Pidgeot. Charizard still wants to go second more often than not. Cleffa is definitely a card that you want to use turn 1 going second, but you could also use Technical Machine Evolution turn 1 going second. Just for 1 energy, you can evolve 2 of your bench Pokemon up, and this can be a great way of getting that Charmeleon on the board as well as that Pidgeotto on the board, so that on the following turn, you can get into your Charizard and Pidgeot. You could even use this to set up a Dusclops in order to get to Dusknoir on the following turn as well. Morty's Conviction is a interesting one of in this particular build of Charizard. This is one I didn't see in every Charizard list, but I do like its inclusion here, where you get to discard a card and then draw a card equal to the number of your opponent's benched Pokemon. And in a format where Area Zero Underdepths exists in particular, and a number of Charizard lists are going to be running Area Zero Underdepths going forward, there's going to be a lot of opportunities to draw a ton of cards off of Morty's Conviction. Again, giving you more opportunities to get those pieces so that you can set up your Charizard and Pidgeot early. Jacques is a card that we had only really seen in Lugia up to this point, but this is one I saw a little more in Charizard lists, letting you grab 2 evolution Pokemon, revealing them and putting them into your hand, then shuffling your deck. This is nice because we have 3 stage 2s in this deck, so lots of evolution happening in this deck, and Jacques gives us an opportunity to grab 2 pieces and get set up a little better. One more tech here, Technical Machine Devolution. This is a card that we have seen in and out of Charizard lists for some time. With only 1 energy, you can devolve your opponent's highest stage Pokemon down a step, and this is great in certain matchups where Charizard at the beginning of the game isn't one-hit KOing certain multi-prize Pokemon, but if you can devolve them down and then that damage that you put there initially is enough to knock out that next step, then they just get wiped off the board. And in certain cases where you're fighting against decks that rely very heavily on rare candy, Devolution can really screw them over if they end up going from a stage 2 all the way down to a basic and they don't have that middle evolution. So Technical Machine Devolution, just a really nice tech in this build. The second Charizard Pidgeot list makes a couple of minor tweaks, but they kind of go about drawing extra cards in a slightly different way. We don't have the Cleffa in here, but we do have a Squawkabilly EX. And I actually experimented with Squawkabilly in Charizard. I made a video about if you had just the Charizard League Battle Deck and the Trainer's Toolkit, how would you build that deck? And one of the choices I made was Squawkabilly EX. And one of the things I like about Squawkabilly in this particular build is that whether you're going turn 1, going first or second, you can play down the Squawkabilly, discard your hand, draw 6 cards, and that just gives you an opportunity to refresh your hand and give you a better chance of getting the cards you need to set up on the following turn. Cyrano is a card from Surging Sparks that we haven't really seen in competitive play up until now, but it is a nice addition to this deck. Lets you grab 3 Pokemon EX from your deck and put them into your hand. And this can be our way of grabbing Charizard, Pidgeot, and Fezandipiti EX all in one go, making it a little easier for us to set up. Last little tech here is Bravery Charm. Now, Charizard and Pidgeot can't use this, but you can put this on your Fezandipiti EX or your Squawkabilly EX, and in either case, you are screwing up the math for your opponent's Dragapult so that they are not able to either take an instant KO on your Squawkabilly, or it kind of screws up the math so your opponent's not getting as many multi-prize KOs with Dragapult with Bravery Charm on either your Fezandipiti or your Squawkabilly. One more Charizard Pidgeot list, and this one is the wackiest of the bunch. We don't have the Dusknoir line in here, but the newest addition here is the Dunsparce line. And we've got a 2-2 line, 2-2 and then 1 EX, but the Dunsparce is here for drawing cards, where it's runaway draw ability. When at any point you can pop the Dunsparce and draw 3 cards, and then shuffle the Dunsparce and the Dunsparce back into your deck. And that gives you the opportunity to put the Dunsparce back down and continually draw cards with this engine. It's a really nice way of drawing extra pieces, and an additional benefit to running the Dunsparce line is the new Dunsparce EX that is coming out as part of Journey Together. This one has the attack Adversity Tail. You're not going to use its second attack as well. You might use its second attack, but we'll get to that in a sec. So the big advantage to Dunsparce EX is that Adversity Tail attack for 1 energy Colorless energy at that lets you do 60 damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon EX in play. There will be times where your opponent is playing a lot of EX cards and Charizard's damage is capped by the amount of prizes your opponent has taken. There will be points in the game against certain decks where the Dunsparce will hit harder than Charizard. So having that as an option while you're also using it to draw cards if you evolve up into the regular Dunsparce is a really nice tech. And then its Breaking Drill attack does 150 damage and isn't affected by any effects of your opponent's active Pokemon. So Charizard has really struggled against walling Pokemon like a Mimikyu or a Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, and you are sometimes running Cancel and Cologne to get around that. In this particular build, you can just throw all your energy onto a Dunsparce and shred through them with Breaking Drill. I don't necessarily think it's the best way to use your Charizard's Infernal Rain ability, but it is an option available to you now if you are playing this version of Charizard with a Dunsparce EX in it. As I said previously, Charizard Pidgeot, while it has been the most popular way to play Charizard up until this point, that doesn't seem to be the direction that Japan is going in a post-rotation format. We did look at a couple of lists that were in that Charizard Pidgeot style, but based on the results I'm seeing from Limitless, as you can see here, most of these are actually of the Noctowl / Terapagos variety, which does pose some interesting opportunities for Charizard. And if you're interested in seeing how this style of Charizard deck works, I actually made a video on this a couple of months ago where I said this might be the future of Charizard, and it looks like this actually is the future of Charizard. Not to say that the builds we just looked at were bad, but it seems like directionally a lot of the community is moving towards a Terapagos based build. So if you're interested in seeing how this kind of deck works right now, take a look at my Charizard Terapagos video. Link is in the description, and then we'll go and look at some of the new lists from Japan right here. This first example of a Charizard Terapagos build maintains the Charizard and the Dusknoir lines, but we are taking out the Pidgeot here and putting in that Terapagos package. Now, Terapagos itself serves multiple purposes here. One, it's a basic Terra Pokemon, which means we can open up Area 0 Underdepths and expand our bench up to 8. And yes, Charizard technically will also trigger Area 0 Underdepths. It'll also trigger the new Noctowl without the need of Terapagos. But with Terapagos being a basic Pokemon, we don't have to evolve up to Charizard in order to take advantage of the extra wide bench or being able to pick out any extra cards with Noctowl. So Terapagos, as long as you have it on the board, you can take advantage of Area 0 Underdepths and Noctowl right away without having to evolve up to Charizard, especially if you need Noctowl to evolve up to Charizard in the first place. As a secondary attacker, it's actually not that bad either. Its Unified Beatdown attack does 30 damage for each of your benched Pokemon, and since we can get up to 8 bench Pokemon here, and we're not running double turbo energy anymore because that has been rotated out, we can actually swing for 240 damage with Terapagos, which is enough to take out pretty much every big basic EX in the game. Some Charizard Terapagos lists still have that 1/1 Pidgeot line, and we're going to look at one in a sec. This particular one goes all in on Noctowl, and I don't necessarily hate that as a deck building decision either. You do have the opportunity when you evolve from Hoothoot to Noctowl to grab 2 trainer cards of your choice and put them into your hand. The benefits of not running Pidgeot is that you don't have that 2 prize liability, though you are sacrificing the flexibility to pull whatever you want, which is what Pidgeot can do. So I'm not sure where I sit on that. I think initially I probably would squeeze in a 1/1 Pidgeot line, but a 4/4 line of Noctowl does not seem that bad in all things considered. With the Terra Pokemon in play, Area 0 Underdepths expands our bench to 8, and you don't necessarily have to wait to evolve up to Charizard in order to take advantage of Area 0 Underdepths. If you've got a Terapagos in play, you pretty much get the advantage of Area 0 Underdepths right away, and that gives you a lot of room to put all of these Pokemon in play. Multiple Hoothoots, your Charmanders, your Terapagos, your Dusknoir line, Pheasantipity, all of that can be squeezed in with Area 0 Underdepths, and if your opponent bumps the Area 0 Underdepths, then you just get rid of the Noctowls that you've already used because you can't recycle them anyway. Colress's Tenacity is an interesting tech here, lets you grab any energy as well as a Stadium. So you could grab a Fire Energy, or you could grab that Jet Energy to launch something like the Terapagos or even the Fan Rotom can be an effective attacker. Like Fan Rotom with Jet Energy, and you've got that Stadium Area 0 Underdepths in play, actually will punch for 70, which is going to be enough to take out something like a Mimikyu in scenarios where your opponent's walling you off. So Call Resist Tenacity could be a sneaky good tech in this deck. Mela's an interesting tech that we haven't seen that much in competitive play, but I do like the idea of it here. If one of your Pokemon was knocked out on the previous turn, you can attach a basic Fire Energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon and then draw until you have 6 cards. So this is not only a way of accelerating energy either to your Charizard or your Terapagos, but also gives you an opportunity to draw more cards and potentially get set up. This second Charizard Terapagos list takes out one of the Hoot Hoots and Noctowls and squeezes in a Pidgeot line in its place. I personally like this move. I like having that flexibility of being able to grab any card from my deck once per turn with the Pidgeot EX, and I think getting rid of one Hoot Hoot and one Noctowl is worth it. Bravery Charm serves multiple purposes here. If you need to attack with Terapagos for an extended period of time, you could make your Terapagos a little tankier, bumping up its HP to 280. It can also help protect your Pheasantipity EX, giving it an extra 50 HP and screwing up the math, in particular for Dragapult, who could take advantage of its low HP to take multiple prizes on a future turn. So Bravery Charm, really nice tech here. As for the Ace Spec, I think this is a little open to interpretation. This particular build has Maximum Belt for plus 50 damage on EX Pokemon. This is going to be even better going forward because we're now in a format where there's no Pokemon V or V-Star, V-Max, and every multi-prize Pokemon is going to be an EX. So this is going to be more effective than it has been in the past, and certain Pokemon like Terapagos can take advantage of Maximum Belt, where now it's swinging for 200, upwards of 290 damage, which can be really nice. And of course with Charizard, you can just do absolutely insane damage with Maximum Belt. But one of the benefits of Charizard is that Charizard works really well with a number of different Ace Specs, whether it's Prime Catcher, Hero's Cape, Unfair Stamp, and so on. So this particular person went with the Maximum Belt, and I don't hate it. This third Charizard Terapagos list techs in an attacker that I saw in a number of Charizard Terapagos lists, and that is Lily's Clefairy EX. And this one's a really interesting tech. I do like it for a multitude of reasons. One, it hits Dragon-type Pokemon for weakness thanks to that Fairy Zone ability. Two, it has a really strong attack, Full Moon Rondo, where for a Psychic and a Colorless does 20 damage, plus 20 more damage for each bench Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. Charizard accelerates 3 energy, so you could put one of those fire energies onto Clefairy to bank it for later. You could even attack with Lily's Clefairy on turn 1 going second if you draw into a Crispin, where you can grab 2 energy of different types from your deck, put one onto the Clefairy, and then put the other one into your hand to then attach to the Clefairy. And there are going to be times where Lily's Clefairy can hit breakpoints that Charizard isn't. This is also an attacker that can attack on the first turn of the game, which Charizard can't do either. And on top of all that, with the Area 0 Underdepths, you are potentially swinging for really big damage. And if you can hit the wombo combo of also getting Lily's Pearl onto a Clefairy, your Lily's Clefairy can one-hit KO a lot of multi-prize Pokemon while also only dropping 1 prize when it gets KO'd itself. So there are a lot of benefits to teching a Lily's Clefairy into this deck. This last Charizard Terapagos list makes some minor adjustments here. We do see it adopt the Badoo for that item lock, but we also see it tech in 1 copy of Blood Moon Ursaluna EX. It has a very expensive attack in Blood Moon, but that attack cost comes down for each prize your opponent has taken. And this sort of serves the role that Radiant Charizard used to serve, as that sort of easy to set up endgame attacker for really nice damage. Now, the trade-off with Blood Moon Ursaluna is that it's doing slightly less damage, 240 versus 250, and then it's also it's a 2-prize Pokemon instead of a single prize Pokemon like Radiant Charizard, where there's going to be times where this just isn't as useful as Radiant Charizard used to be, but in certain cases where you are able to take a multi-prize KO or just take that last KO that you need to win the game and you aren't able to set up an attacker properly, Blood Moon Ursaluna could fit the bill. Dragapult Charizard has never been the most popular way to play either Dragapult or Charizard, but this has been a known combo in the community for a while. It's still not popular in Japan, but it is seeing some play here and there. In this particular archetype, Dragapult is your primary attacker here, where in particular you want to leverage Phantom Dive as often as you can. You're doing 200 damage to the active as well as dropping 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like, taking out smaller evolution Pokemon or softening up bigger targets for multiple knockouts on future turns. And we also have Dracloak, which you're evolving from your Dreepy to the Dracloak into ultimately the Dragapult. But Dracloak is a really nice draw engine here where you can use Recon Directive to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one into your hand, and then put the other one at the bottom of your deck. Dragapult loves Badoo, and we do have one copy of Badoo here. With that Itchy Pollen attack for 0 energy, you do 10 damage while also item locking your opponent on the following turn. If you're going second and you're not item locking your opponent with Badoo, you could use Technical Machine Evolution as your attack instead, where for 1 energy, you can evolve 2 of your bench Pokemon to the next stage up, and that can get your Dracloak in play, can get your Charmeleon in play. So whatever the case might be, whatever combo, this is getting you one step closer to getting your stage 2s in action. For draw support, we've got a 1/1 Noctowl line, where when we evolve into Noctowl, we can grab 2 trainer cards of our choice and put them into our hand. Now, we have to have a Terra Pokemon in play in order to take advantage of this, so make sure you've got Dragapult or Charizard ready before you evolve into Noctowl. We do have Pheasantipede EX to draw 3 cards after our opponent has knocked one of our Pokemon out on the previous turn. We also squeeze in 1 copy of Mew EX, where its restart ability lets us draw until we have 3 cards in our hand. A little punch of draw power here. We also theoretically could use Genome Hacking to attack, where for 3 colorless energy, we get to copy one of our opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. I don't necessarily think this is going to be the best use of our energy, but it is an option here and could prove beneficial in certain scenarios. Further lending credence to the idea that this is primarily a Dragapult deck first, the A-spec of choice here is Sparkling Crystal, which reduces the attack cost on Terra Pokemon by 1. Yes, theoretically, you could make Charizard swing for 1 less energy, but that doesn't really benefit Charizard because it can power itself up anyway. So the biggest benefactor here is Dragapult. This second version of Dragapult Charizard that got 2nd place at a tournament in Osaka looks very similar to the one we just looked at, but they managed to squeeze in a 2/1/1 line of Dusknoir, giving us even more opportunities to splash damage counters on the board. Dusknoir drops 13 damage counters on one of our opponent's Pokemon, and we knock out the Dusknoir, or the Dusclops drops 5 damage counters while it knocks itself out. So just giving us more opportunities to either take out smaller targets or soften up bigger ones before we swing with our Dragapult or Charizard. Now let's get funky. This Charizard Zoroark list, this was the only one that I saw, but it is the early days of the post-rotation format. We might see this gain popularity. Who knows? We do have the Charizard line here. We have the Dusknoir line. We do have that Ursaluna as an endgame attacker and Pheasantipede to draw more cards. But the biggest surprise here is a 3/3 line of En's Zoroark EX. Now, we don't have any dark energy or attacks that we can copy with N Zoroark, so this is not an attacker in the deck at all. However, we can use its trade ability to discard a card from our hand and draw 2 cards. So instead of having the Pidgeot or the Noctowls, we are just using N Zoroark to discard cards and draw more. I don't necessarily know if this is going to prove to be the best draw engine for Charizard, but I definitely applaud this player for trying this out, and they did very well at this tournament, so maybe there's something here. One of my big concerns with running Zoroark as a draw engine, besides the fact that it is a 2-prize liability that can't attack here, is that it does have a 2 retreat cost, but with N's Castle in play, you can reduce that to 0, so you don't have to worry about your N Zoroark getting stuck, at least for 1 turn, where you can play N's Castle and then just retreat out into the appropriate attacker. We could also use Scoop Up Cyclone to get a stuck Zoroark out of the active, but this also has some other benefits. If we have a damaged Charizard EX, we can use Scoop Up Cyclone to essentially heal it by taking it off the board entirely, and ideally we would then evolve into another Charizard from there to continue our attack. We also could use Scoop Up Cyclone to get Blood Moon Ursaluna out of the active if it unfortunately gets stuck at the beginning of the game And one more way of fixing our active if something gets stuck in there, we do have Jet Energy to launch the appropriate Pokemon into the active spot so that you're not stuck with Zoroark or Blood Moon Ursaluna in the active. Brock Scouting is a new card from Journey Together. It has 2 different effects, and you can choose one of them when you play it. You can either search your deck for 2 basic Pokemon and put them into your hand, or you can search your deck for 1 evolution Pokemon, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle your deck. I'm not necessarily sure this is better than having your, appropriate number of Pokemon ball search cards or Buddy Buddy Poffin, but they do tech that in there, and I do see that they're a little thin on Nest Balls and Ultra Balls, so maybe this is the appropriate substitutions for those. I'm not entirely sure, but definitely some benefits of being able to grab multiple basic Pokemon or having that flexibility of using it for an evolution Pokemon is nice as well. This last one is really wacky, and really it's a hop deck that happens to have a Charizard line bolted onto it. And I guess you could argue the other way around because we aren't running any metal energy, so Zacian is not using its primary attack here. But Zacian is a very helpful piece of this particular puzzle, where its close cleave attack does 30 damage to the active and then 30 damage to the bench. However, we can boost the attack power of this attack quite a bit thanks to Snorlax, which has the ability of boosting Hop's Pokemon's damage by 30, as well as Hop's Choice Band, which gives us another 30 damage boost while also reducing the attack cost by 1, as well as Postwick, which adds yet again another 30 damage. So when we add all of that up, if you can get those all in play at one time, Close Cleave can then do 120 damage for 0 energy, while also doing 30 to the bench. So in this particular build, we're not using Brave Slash at all. We are kind of trying to spam Hop Zacian EX's Close Cleave attack as our way of starting our offense. And then from there, we've got the Hops Cramorant as a nice middle attacker where it's doing 120 damage for 1 energy, but you could again drop that down to 0 and then boost that damage even higher with all of those extra upgrades, the Snorlax, the Hops Band, as well as the Stadium. And you can only use this attack if your opponent has 3 or 4 prizes remaining. So you're not going to be able to use this throughout the game, but this can be a really cool tech attacker in the mid game. And then of course we have our Charizard EX, which is a pretty low maintenance attacker in and of itself. You can, once you set this up, it accelerates energy to itself, and you can bring this in at the appropriate time to be your big attacker when you need it. And since we are running Charizard EX, which is a Terra Pokemon, that gives us the opportunity to use Noctowl as well, which allows us to grab 2 trainer cards of our choice from our deck and put them into our hand when we evolve up to Noctowl. There we go. That is an early look at post-rotation Charizard EX. Again, it's the early days of the format. We are seeing right now a lot of Terapagos in Charizard, but things may change over time. We might see little optimizations here and there. We might see big swooping archetype changes. Maybe the Zoroark version becomes the most popular way to play it. Maybe Dragapult Charizard becomes the big way to play it. But for the time being, I think that this is a great way to see where things are roughly at. It does look like Charizard's going to be a good deck going forward. There's a number of different ways to build Charizard going forward that all look pretty strong in their own ways. So I'll leave it to you to decide which variation or variations of the deck you want to try out. And again, this is still early in their post-rotation format. By the time our rotation comes out, I will put out one more video covering all of the major deck archetypes, and we'll look at Charizard again and see how things have progressed since this video. But for now, I got to get going. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this makes you feel a little more comfortable about your Charizard deck going forward. Definitely still looks pretty good, and depending on how you build it, it could be as simple as a couple of tweaks here and there. But anyway, I got to get going. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to be doing a lot more post-rotation coverage. I believe the next deck I'm going to be covering in this series is Gardevoir EX, so definitely look out for that. And yeah, you can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at InThirdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at InThirdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website InThirdPerson.com for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.